I've got a surprise for you guys. Today we're in the back of the ute with Randal and Juanita Breen from Echo Valley Farm. I'm really happy to be able to speak to them and be on their farm, because we were just discussing about 4 years ago Darren Doherty was here and primarily sort of talking about the Regrarian approach, because that's where he learnt through Joel Salatin with the Polyface side of things, and just to see how they're going with their business model, because I know Echo Valley Farm's name is throughout southeast Queensland now. They're really popular, and I just wanted to introduce you all to these two. So welcome to the back of the ute.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me on farm. So yeah, let's just start with Darren and how you met him and how that day happened.
Yeah. Well, I guess our journey started even before with exploring some of the principles and teachings of that Darren talks about, even prior to us coming to this farm. So as we were starting on our regenerative journey, there was a number of people in the regen movement that we were sort of following and learning from. And Darren Doherty and the Regrarians platform was definitely one of them. And then Colin Seiss is another guy who does a lot of pasture cropping and that sort of stuff. So when we moved onto the farm and made the commitment to full-time agriculture, regenerative agriculture, we started to look around for people to connect with. And that's when we met Helen Lewis, who's a holistic manager and trainer, and she runs with her husband Ian Picco's farm out on the western side of Warwick, just near us. And she was coordinating a day, wanting to bring Darren Doherty up to spend some time talking about how to create a whole farm plan. So one of the things Darren does a lot of is creating holistically, looking at your whole farm, both the landscape but also your enterprises and your own personal values, and how you bring all of those things together to create a whole farm design. And he's very, very, very good at the sort of landscape design elements of creating a farm that is regenerative and that will maximise the strengths of your environment.
Now I know at the time, Juanita, you were still going to the farm markets, weren't you?
Yeah.
With your eggs.
Yep.
And how has that progressed? Are you still doing that?
No, we had to. No, we're not going to the farmers markets anymore. We had to evolve. I think, like a lot of businesses, we had to evolve in the pandemic. So, beginning of 2020, I suppose the unpredictability of where COVID was going to go and how it was going to impact markets and our food outlets through through Brisbane, we decided to move everything online. And so we now probably retail 40% of our produce through our online store, and then we just have pickup points around Brisbane that we nominate for people to collect each week. So we still are driving into Brisbane with produce, but we're not at farmers markets anymore.
So you're finding that more efficient?
Yeah, absolutely more efficient. It's still hard work and there's still a lot of driving, but I think what it allows us to do is we were limited at the market, I suppose, with what produce we could offer and what we could sell, whereas now, because it's our own platform, we get to decide what's listed, we get to decide what produce we make available for people. And so at the markets, for instance, we really were limited to selling our eggs, whereas now we can retail our beef, we can retail our pork, we can do our cured. So it's given us, an opportunity to expand.
Yeah, that's great, because I remember Darren sort of wryly smiling about it, going, so you're interested in the social side of it, because that's what farmers markets are.
Absolutely.
Primarily, really, aren't they? You've got to have to shift a lot of produce to actually make it viable financially.
Yeah, and I think too, moving towards an online retail space enables us, when we leave the farm, everything we're taking is sold. So we're not going with the uncertainty of whether we're going to sell the product for the week. So we list it, it's sold, it's paid for, and we're just delivering it to our customers. So that's a huge benefit to us as farmers, because we're not spending huge amounts of time off farm not knowing whether we are even going to make budget, like we're going to cover our costs for the week. So that's been a huge benefit.
And that's that whole flip from rather supply and create demand, it's demand and then you just supply the supply.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And has that worked out? Because I know you were, we'll go back to with your cattle, because there weren't any fences here, or you were just starting with your fences for that whole rotational time rotation.
So we're still using very much, everything's portable. Our farm historically is sort of 50-50 conventionally farmed country that was for 120 years prior to us arriving was under full tillage and chemical use. And so when we came here, we've started the transition towards returning it back to perennial grasslands. And then we have about the same amount of remnant vegetation. So there was some fencing in place. A lot of it was pretty run down, but most of our fencing now we've found with our system easiest to use portable electric fencing. So it just means that no one fence is in the same location ever, and we can adjust that paddock size dependent on how much grass growth, how much impact we want to create, how many livestock we've got at the time, and that gives us a lot of flexibility. A lot more labour, obviously, because every time we move an animal we've got to move a fence, and we talk about the fact our job is feeding and fencing, like that's what we do. And so that's where we're seeing huge beneficial results from our landscape sculpture with the animals.
Yeah. And you've got the chickens and the cattle. Have you got any other livestock?
Yes, and we run pastured pigs. So we have 3 core enterprises in terms of end product, which is cattle, poultry and pigs, all are nomadic, moving across the landscape, and are used at this point to help move our landscape and heal it, and try to bring it to a healthier position as it recovers from its previous history.
So which sequence do you use, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter overly. In a perfect world, which farming isn't that, but in a perfect world what we do is we'll graze our livestock, so the cattle will come in, they'll graze the grass down, our chooks will come behind that, they will then sanitise behind the cattle, spreading out the manure, removing any parasites, but also leaving their manure behind, and priming the soil, and then I will come in behind them and plant, direct drill, zero tillage, a diverse cover crop behind those chooks, and that's all about trying to help our soil kickstart again into perennial and diverse pastures. So because our landscape has been under monocultured tillage and growing monocultured crops for 120 years, it's almost forgotten how to grow other things. And so we're trying to wake that up, and so that's why we will then cover crop behind our poultry, and then the seeds we plant utilise the fertility that the chooks have left behind, and then roughly 100 days after we leave and we've planted, then those cows are coming back in, and so that's the cycle. Now at the moment we've had one of the most amazing seasons we've ever had, and so we've got more grass than we know what to do with, and I've run out of kidneys to buy more cattle, and so we're a little bit short on livestock, but we're focusing on areas rather than trying to cover the whole landscape. So we're giving some areas some big long rests, and then our pigs come in quite different to they don't interact with those other 2 animals. They're really our fertilisers or our nutrition relocators. Yeah, so we divert a huge amount of food waste out of manufacturers in Brisbane and divert them back onto the farm here and feed them through our 4-legged compost bins, which are our pigs, and then they deposit that nutrient back onto our landscape, which then filters out throughout the rest of the farm. So
the pigs don't move so much?
They're moving, but they're
in the higher landscape.
So that's exactly right. So they're located very high up in our landscape, so that all of that nutrition that we're importing. So we bring in about 500 tonnes of food waste a year that otherwise would be in landfill, and put it through our pigs, and all of that nutrition then is slowly soaking and filtering out through the rest of our farm.
Brilliant idea. And it's working.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
There's no end. It's unbelievable the
Yeah.
waste that is generated in our system.
Yeah, to give you an idea, just this week alone, we received a delivery of 60 tonnes of sorghum grain that was spilt at the port that was destined for export, and just because it fell out of the mill, that it was going to go into landfill, and so that's about 12 months supply of grain for our pigs.
Yeah, I don't think the pigs will get through that.
Yeah, but we'll also compost that and put that out as fertiliser.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's pretty critical for our farming systems. The margins are so tight now for farmers, and particularly regenerative farmers, because I think what's important to acknowledge is that anyone that's made the choice to farm regeneratively is not only trying to find viability for themselves in their landscape, but they're also paying down the debt that was left to them by previous farming practices. And so the margins are pretty tight. And so wherever we can find ways to utilise things that perhaps in our society are considered to be waste, and put them back into the system, that we then benefit not only for nutrition for our livestock, but also soil fertility and increasing the biodiversity within our landscape, I think is a really important thing to do.
Do you feed your cattle any grain, or you
No.
don't need to? You've got enough food on.
Yeah. So our cattle are 100% grass fed and finished. So we take them right through to processing. We also run a small Brangus stud, so a cattle stud. So we produce seed stock, cows and bulls. And the whole focus is about producing an animal that is an easy doing animal that can finish on grass.
Okay. And do you trade at all?
No.
No. So the reason you haven't got enough cattle now is purely because normally you don't have this much feed.
Yeah, so there's two reasons. So firstly, 2019. So if we look at this year, we've had over a metre of rain in this last 12 months. In 2019 was the driest year on record for our area, and we had 187 millimetres.
Right.
So if you imagine a whole period of a whole 12-month period, we got half a soft drink can worth of water poured out on our landscape. Yeah. So we were really in a lot of trouble. So we did a lot of destocking. So one of the things with holistic management is that as you lose feed, you reduce your numbers on your landscape so that you produce less pressure. And so we were destocked, and now we've had all this rain, and because the cattle market at the moment is unbelievable, it's at historically high prices, it's just very hard to get more livestock back on the landscape.
Okay. So if it was affordable, you would have?
Oh yeah, we'd have tenfold what we've currently got.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So it was just whatever you could.
Yeah. So we're just slowly breeding back up. We've bought in what we can.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so we're just looking at other ways in which we can affect positive outcomes on our landscape without using cattle in some ways. So we talk about getting on the iron horse, which getting the tractor and the slasher to try to break down some of that organic matter and put it back into the soil. Yeah. Which isn't the perfect system because it doesn't poo and wee and have hooves, but it is beneficial.
Yeah. It's probably better though doing.
Uh-oh.
Where did it go? Oh, dear.
Let's watch that cactus too, don't get yourself...
That gust was just a little bit too hard.
It'll be alright. How are we?
Yes.
We're travelling alright?
Yeah, no, you're awesome. Really good. No,
Good.
I'm really enjoying this. I was going to say, so actually letting your paddock grow fully, completely out is not as beneficial, is it, as sort of cutting it and slashing it and laying it over. Is that right?
Yeah, to some degree. I think in a perfect world, if you could graze it, we're letting a lot of our landscape at the moment fully go right through to senescence when it moves past productive growth. only because we know that we've got a lot. So when we do our what we call our feed budget or our grass budget, about how much feed we've got in front of our livestock, because we've got so much abundance at the moment, and we know we could, if it didn't rain tomorrow, like if the tap turned off tomorrow, we'd get through winter throughout the other side. So we've got well over 100 days worth of grazing ahead of us, so we can actually utilise some of these, some of the growth of this plant's growth to benefit the soil.
Yeah.
But also the other thing is when a plant's actively growing, so it's in that green growth stage, is when it's giving the most benefit to the soil, as it, you know, it excretes all its exudates and all that sort of stuff and feeds the microbes in the soil. So we're trying to get that balance right.
Yeah.
We're hugely low on organic matter here because of how long it's been farmed for. So most of the Darling Downs has been farmed for a long time, and you know we've shifted, we've mined out that organic matter over the time of farming, and so we're at about, when we first came here we were at about 1.2%, and historically pre-white colonial farming systems, this soil would have been around 9% organic matter.
Wow, okay. Because these valleys here are beautiful.
Yeah. Amazing.
And the soil is very forgiving, and I think that's the danger, is that it's being taken advantage of because it is so forgiving.
Yep.
So you're finding now, or my question was going to be, how many years was it until you saw your perennials coming back?
We're only just starting to see it.
So how many years is that?
That's 8 years.
Holy.
Yeah. So and I think what's really important to reflect on though is that in those 8 years of farming, so when we came here, on the day we drove down the driveway, that farming land was either had been set monocultured, it had oats in, or it was bare ground preparing for summer cropping, and that's traditional for this whole valley.
Yeah.
So then we had to turn that around. But as we were shifting and trying to change our management model for this farm, we were drying. So we were in the cycle of a drying environment, and then progressively got drier and drier. So as we were trying to manoeuvre the healing process for the soil, the environment was, well, I wouldn't say it was fighting against us, but it was in a more challenging state.
Yeah.
It almost reset us again.
Right.
So we weren't far enough along that journey of regeneration that once the drought hit, it kind of reset us.
Yeah.
We kind of, so that was a challenge.
Yeah, and so it has really been the last 12 months as we've had a better water cycle going on, and we've been able to maintain cover on the ground, that all of a sudden things are starting to trigger. So when we put in our cover crops, we're planting annuals and perennial seeds all together, and then just observing. And what's been really interesting to see, as we're building more diversity in plant life, growing, all of a sudden the perennials are starting to come. So this year's been really, really exciting to see plant varieties that we haven't planted and that we've never seen before just arrive. And that's those seeds have sat in the soil just waiting for the cue to take off.
Have you been able to identify them, or have you had to send them somewhere?
A bit of both. There's some good apps now. But no, it's really exciting to see that change. But it's a long, slow process, and I think when we look at the brittleness scale, so Alan Savory talks about the brittleness scale in terms of your environment, and everybody's different, right? So your farm, the systems that you're using, we have to be very patient, attentive observers in our landscape and look for the cues that it's sending us. And our landscape is sitting towards the more brittle end of the scale, and so things change slowly. And that's why livestock is so important, because they begin that process of, as they eat that grass, that gut activity of passing it through their system is what inoculates that plant life, puts it back on the soil and triggers that shift. Because we don't have ordinarily huge amounts of moisture in our landscape. We have long periods of dry and then short periods of wet. Whereas, as you head in Australia, as you head more towards the coast, then those things start to balance out, and you can see a lot quicker responses. And adversely, as you go further west, that brittleness scale gets greater and greater. So change happens slower and slower. But yeah.
So where are you getting your water from for your livestock?
So most of us, we're basalt country here, so black soil, so very good underground water. Very hard to hold water like rainfall in dams. The soil here is very leaky. So most of our water comes from underground. And we're putting in place a lot of stuff around natural sequence farming stuff from Peter and Stuart Andrews. And that's helping us retain more moisture within the landscape. But in terms of direct animal water, it's coming from underground bore water.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't talked about?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, like we've defined the farming model.
Yeah.
We haven't.
The other thing is the 4 goods. That's probably a value set that we talk about probably a lot.
Yeah, fair bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That guides all of the enterprises and decisions on farm. So that's our 4 values.
Is that for you personally, your 4 values?
Yeah, it's based around, so Juanita and I did some holistic management training with Helen Lewis, and one of the things what holistic management is so good at is helping you define what your context is. What are the core values that are really important to you and your enterprises and your life, and how do you try to get all those things to line up? And so out of that we wrote our context, and then from that context, those values, we then tried to create what we call our testing questions. So what are the things that as people, but as farmers and as business owners, what are the things that are sort of non-negotiables? What are the things that we're going to look at when we're making decisions for an enterprise on the farm, for a behaviour, for something that we want to do that we're going to be able to test against? And so that's where we came up with what we call our 4 goods. So whenever we're going to do something, we sit down and we ask ourselves, is this idea, is it good for the animal? Is it good for the land? Is it good for the farmer? And finally, is it good for the people that we feed? And so those 4 goods is what helps us decide on the trajectory of what we're doing on the farm.
Brilliant. That's great.
Yeah.
And that helps.
Oh, it absolutely does.
And they're in that order too for a specific reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in food production, I think some of the issues that we've got with environment and landscapes now is that we put the consumer first. We put the food, the product at the end first, and then everything else comes behind that. And so the land might be sacrificed for the product, or the animal might be sacrificed for the product. But if we flip that on its head, and is it good for the animal? Okay, is it good for the land? Yes. Is it good for the farmer, the person who's producing it?
Yes.
And then if they're all good, well then it's going to be good for the consumer.
Yeah, it's almost a guaranteed, because you've covered off those 3 core important parts, and so that they're not being mined in order to produce, the perfect food that might be, free of chemicals, yet the poor old farmer's going broke, because he's working his backside off trying to chip all the weeds out so that he can get that classification. Yes. Whereas, they are what help to define our farming model, and I think, it holds us accountable too. Absolutely. And it's a really quick, when we say it every day, it becomes a bit of a mantra, but it's a really quick thing when you go, oh, this would be a great idea, or is it? And you can just rattle those things off. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have
Pleasure.
learned so much.
Awesome.
That's a great chat. And Echo Valley Farm, just remember their name and keep supporting you guys. And what a brilliant business model. Love it. Really, really love it.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no worries.
Brilliant.
Well done, you two. That was awesome.